Hello again everybody and welcome back to my channel, Jersey Shore Pondscapes videos. So today we are talking about building a natural pond, okay? A pond that doesn't necessarily use a UV light and a external filter, so to say, okay? It's something that a pond that's balanced itself and is filtered by itself in some aspects. So let's dive into this. I have a previous video that I did earlier about ponds with bottom drains versus ponds with rock and gravel. And I pretty strongly emphasize the fact that I always build ponds with bottom drains and I never put rock and gravel in my ponds, and I talked about all the reasons why. Please check that out, okay? Please check out that video and you'll see where I'm coming from. However, there are many companies and the majority of landscapers that build these natural ponds, okay, with all rocks and gravel. Now, it certainly can be done. Build a pond all natural with rocks and gravel and no traditional filter and UV light system, okay? We still need a pump to move the water, but not like a filter box with pads and you know, media in it and, you know, UV lights and all that kind of stuff, okay? It is doable. It is a little difficult to do, however, okay? It takes time for that pond to balance, to build up the proper microbes and bacterias in the pond that do these chemical processes that help to keep the pond water quality established and safe and healthy. Now, the reason why I don't build ponds with rock and gravel basically is because I see way too many ponds that are a mess, a real mess, and they all have this rock and gravel in them, okay? Now, these natural ponds without traditional filters need a little extra special care, and I come to find that a lot of my clients don't seem to do that very well, okay? And for me, I want the easiest system and that, you know, less maintenance and easy to clean and easy to maintain. Now, a lot of these natural ponds, people are going to claim that there is very little maintenance to it, and that is true. But when there is maintenance, it can be big, okay? It can be really difficult. So I really want to take my time here and talk about the differences, all right, in some of these ponds. Now, there's a lot of companies that do these natural ponds, and there's a lot of clients that are really pulled into wanting a natural pondscape in their yard, and I get that. Now, some of these companies, and I'm going to say the big one is Aquascapes, okay? They're a huge company and they're very good at what they do, okay? Absolutely. For the average homeowners, I find that I end up ripping a lot of these ponds out in a few years because they become such maintenance issues. And I'm not saying all ponds that are built like that are maintenance issues, but a lot of them are because they're not maintained properly by the homeowners. So for me, when I see those ponds and how dirty and all the muck and slime and sludge and algae covered rocks and leaves in the bottom and all this stuff, and I look at mine, there's no rocks and gravel, it's a clean liner with bottom drains, and there's no sediment and silt and muck and sludge in the bottom of my ponds. To me, it's quite obviously this is a better system. Now, is this natural? like the one with rocks and gravel? Yeah. Why wouldn't it be? Just because I don't put rocks and gravel in the pond makes my pond not natural? It functions the same way. All the microbes and bacteria and stuff that are in, the pond with rocks and gravel are the same bacteria and microbes that are in my pond. Okay? I just have a mechanical filter with pads in it rather than a filter, a natural filter with rock and gravel in it to clean the water. That's really the whole difference, okay? And I use a UV light because I don't want any issues. My clients are spending a lot of money. They want clean, clear water. They don't want me to come back and say, well, your pond is green now, but when the plants start growing and everything starts, setting up, then your pond will clear. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear, I want my pond to be beautiful today, now, always. So I use UV lights, okay? Now, in this whole natural pond, okay, we are filtering the water, but we're doing it in such a way where they call it like a bog filter, okay, which is basically a big hole in the ground that we line. We put these plastic crates in the bottom, like they're almost like milk crates, okay, all in the bottom, and from there up we put larger stone. Then we put a layer of a little bit smaller stone, and then on the top we just put like little 3/4 inch gravel. And what happens is the water's pumped down the bottom, and all the the bigger sludge and sediment settles inside all those milk crates because it's a big open area. Then the water filters through layers of rock to the top, where it then overflows back down a river, stream, whatever, back to the pond. Now, inside of all this gravel on the top, we can put plants. Okay, a lot of times they plant all their flowers, they do all kinds of aquatic plants in there, and they grow like crazy. And all the roots from these plants absorb the nutrients in the water, okay? And those are the same nutrients that algae feeds on. Okay, because algae is a plant as well, but plants like irises and all your bog plants are higher up in the food chain, and they're going to absorb more of those nutrients, thus starving out the algae. Okay, so that's how that balance kind of works. Now, sometimes in these bog filter areas, we have like a big, I forgot what they call them off the top of my head, I'm not thinking, but it's a big cylinder that's almost like a big corrugated pipe that goes down into the bottom of this bog garden, and it has a lid on it. And normally we have all the gravel around it on the top. We can put a big rock on it on the top, or hide some plants around it. But it's an open pit basically where we can put a sump pump down there. And the idea is that periodically, now maybe it's once a year, maybe it's once every 2 years, depends on how big this bog garden filter is. We put a sump pump down there, and we're basically going to suck out all this sludge and sediment from the bottom. Now this is not that simple. It takes time to do that. You got to suck out all the water. You got to hose down all the rocks on the top so that all that water settles down and pushes all that sludge and sediment down at the bottom, where then the pump can eventually start to pull a lot of it out. You'll never get all of it out, but you'll get a lot of it out. All right. Now, where you're pumping that, be careful of that too, because you're going to be pumping out a lot of stinky sludge and muck and mud and crap out of there. Okay. So it's a chore to clean that. Granted, we don't have to do it that often, but when we do, it can be a mess. It can be a lot of mud and muck and sludge coming out of there. Okay, so that's kind of how that works. Now, in the pond itself, we have all the gravel and stuff in there. And all that gravel holds the sediment, okay? Now, the more oxygenation we have in that pond, the healthier that pond is going to be, and we're going to have a better growth of bacteria and microbes in there that are going to do this whole chemical process in the pond, turning ammonia into nitrites, nitrites into nitrates. Now, nitrates are far less toxic than the ammonia and nitrites, but they're used as plant fertilizers. So again, the more plants that we can plant in this pond, the more they're going to absorb those nitrates and control that product of what we call nitrification. Biological filtration, okay, and they'll keep those nitrates from getting too high in your water. So plants are absorbing the end product of the nitrification, the biological filtration, and they are also absorbing the nutrients that algae feeds on, helping to keep the water clear. Okay, so this certainly can be done, but it takes time, and it takes a balance of a certain amount of fish, and it takes a balance of a certain amount of plants. Okay, to provide this whole natural balanced ecosystem. Okay, it's not impossible to do, absolutely not. You can do this, no problem, but it does take some time to establish itself. So now, I've met a gentleman who had one of these big natural ponds, and his water was nice and clear. Okay, he did have a lot of shade on the pond, but his water was really nice and clear. But you can see on the bottom of the pond, in the rocks, there's a lot of sediment. Okay, there's a lot of dirt and stuff, and the rocks are getting covered up here and there, and it's not that clean. So his thing was, he's telling me he had skimmers on the pond that would pull the water out, okay, and the pumps were in the skimmers that pumped down into the bottom of his bog filter. His theory was you need big fish in your pond because the big fish, when they swim, they stir up all the sediment in the bottom. And then that sediment gets out into the water and the skimmers suck it out and then pump it into the filter. Really? So if you need these big fish to stir up all the crap on the bottom, you're going to have cloudy water, right? I mean, but that works if your skimmer's here and your fish swim in here and they stir up the crap, maybe then it'll come up and go into your skimmer. But if your skimmer's here, what about all the crap that's over there 20 feet away? How is that going to work its way into the skimmer? So see, I get it, and I can appreciate what you're trying to do and this whole natural, ecosystem thing. I totally get it, but it just doesn't quite add up to me. Okay, and again, these companies that do these ponds and certify all these landscapers and teach them how to do it, they're good at what they do, but you still have these problems. How are you going to eliminate those problems? It's just not logical. How do you keep sediment from falling to the bottom of the pond? All right. Now, the same gentleman I was talking to who was telling me about the big fish, that you need big fish so they stir up all the garbage on the bottom and it gets to the skimmer, was also telling me about how important the skimmers are because all the leaves and stuff that fall into the pond and can create waste, these skimmers pull it all off so that all these leaves don't end up, in the bottom of the pond rotting and causing, more sludge down there. Now, the microbes and the bacteria and all in the pond will help to break those leaves and sediment down, but it doesn't make it disappear. It turns it into mud. Okay? So this whole theory about the skimmers pulling all the leaves and everything off the surface so it doesn't settle down at the bottom, is great. Okay, but as he's telling me about this, I'm looking at his pond, and his pond was pretty big. It was probably about 20, 25 foot round, you know, by 30. I mean, it was a nice sized pond. And it was full of water lilies, big masses of water lilies around with all the flowers. It was beautiful. But I'm thinking, okay, leaves fall down in the pond over there. You've got all these water lilies around here. How is all those leaves going to work its way all the way back here? Okay, now granted, his skimmer was here. His waterfalls were down the other end. So he basically is pulling water from this end and returning it to that end. So it's circulating this whole body of water. Absolutely. But the leaves that fall over there are going to have a hard time making it all the way over here. He's got all the lily pads in the pond. All right, now that's just the leaves from the trees. What about all the waste, all the dead, rotting leaves and flowers off these water lilies? Where's that going? Because they just don't float. You know, they just don't, like the leaf on a lily, just, or the flowers just don't, you know, turn yellow and die off and just fall off and float to a skimmer. They sink to the bottom. You know how much mess is underneath those lilies in the pond? Okay. So while I get this whole natural, you know, pond and the whole draw to that, to me, a clean environment is so much more healthier. It's so much more healthy, right? You're going to have all that organic waste in the pond from the leaves and the sludge and the fish waste in the rocks rotting. Okay? That is going to be giving off toxins and ammonia and all kinds of stinky stuff that's just... I want that out of my pond. I don't want that in my pond. Okay, so while the rocks and gravel look nice, it does, it really does, if it's taken care of. Some of these ponds, you know, again, I'm showing some pictures up back here. You can see they're a mess. All right. Now, also, a lot of these natural ponds, and again, I'm going to use Aquascapes because they're huge and they're a big company, and I give them all the credit in the world. They do a great job. They build all these ponds and they have a ton of people that do them really, really well. But in this whole natural pond, okay, you're still using a skimmer. And one of their most popular filters is called a Purifalls, which is a big filter box. There's different sizes, but they're big filter box where the water comes in the bottom and there's layers of pads in there, and then maybe a media bag with, you know, I use a ribbon in it, or a lot of people use lava rocks or something like that. And then it flows through all that media, and then there's a spillway in the front of this filter tank. You can see in another one of my videos, I have on filters for small ponds. I have one of these. It's not an Aquascapes filter, but it's the same thing, just from a different company. And it fills up with water, and then it overflows out this spillway, and then, you know, pours down either a waterfall into a stream bed or whatever. So while you're building this natural ecosystem, you're still using, you know, artificial, man-made filter tanks and skimmers. Okay? So I guess my point is, overall, you know, you want a natural pond in your backyard, so to speak, right? You know, when we say natural, we want to say, you know, it's a whole ecosystem, a natural ecosystem that's self-sustaining and self-cleaning and all this stuff. Like, okay, I get that. But here we go, you know, what's the difference between doing a natural pond that has all the rocks and gravel in it and a bog filter with a skimmer and pumps, opposed to a pond that doesn't have rocks and gravel in it, uses a bottom drain and uses an external filter and maybe a UV light, okay? I mean, you're creating the same thing right? A healthy environment for the life that you're putting into it, for the plants, for the fish, right? For frogs, for turtles, for the squirrels and the chipmunks and the deer and whoever, whatever, you know, dragonflies and insects that come by the pond and rely on that water source to survive. Same thing. So for me, doing it, you know, with these bottom drains and gravity-fed filter systems, it's still a natural pond. It still looks, I still have the bacteria and the microbes in it and everything. I just don't have the dirty mess in the bottom. Okay? And, you know, I can still put plants in mine. I can still do all that. All right. So I just wanted to talk back on this again and talk about this subject of building a natural pond, okay? You know, with the gravel and all the plants and everything in it, and 2 ways to do it, basically, and still be natural, right? I get both sides. I've been doing this a long time. I get it. I know how each one works. I just choose to keep my ponds clean with bottom drains and gravity-fed filter systems. The maintenance is easy for me. My customers who, you know, work aren't home all day to take care of these ponds. They come home to a nice clean pond that's running and there's no issues. You know, so just something to think about. Again, thank you for listening to me. I hope I kind of explained a little bit to you and kind of gave you some ideas and, you know, helped you along in deciding, you know, the path that you'd like to go down. And, you know, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, check out my website, www.pondscapesandmore.com, and you'll see a bunch of ponds and jobs that I've built in the past. And, you know, again, there's no rock and gravel in any of them. And I say, I have a lot of happy clients. They love their ponds. So, you know, please check it out. Thanks for listening, and check out that other video I did on ponds with bottom drains versus ponds with rock and gravel, and it explores this subject a little bit more. And thank you again. Take care. I hope to see you in another video. Thank you. Bye.